Welcome to Kevin Richards VIPs. Today's guest knows all about making decisions mid-flight. From landing gears to making beers, let's get to know Dustin Norlund. So I'm sitting with my new friend Dustin down at Barnstormer Brewery on Yonge Street in Barrie. Nice to see you, Dustin.
Yeah, good to have you, Kevin.
Thanks for taking the time. It's not exactly the greatest weather today. We do get some crazy weather here in Barrie. Now, you're not even originally from Barrie, okay? So we're going to kind of do that real quick because I want to know a little bit about, you came to Barrie, but where were you before this?
Yep, I grew up in Kansas City. I grew up in Kansas City, went to the University of Kansas for mechanical engineering, actually, and a little bit of aerospace as well. So,
cool.
Ended up here in Barrie with family.
So, when you were in Kansas City, what were you doing down there? You were in the aviation.
I was.
Okay.
You know, aviation has been a big piece of my life, that and brewing. I'm a bit of an oddball in the aviation world. I both have a pilot's license, a mechanic's license, and also the engineering degree to, say, design airplanes.
So you can make them, fly them,
done a little bit of everything in the aviation world.
So when you got out of university, Jayhawks, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You're taking on Mizzou all the time, good rivalry.
Yeah, not anymore. They're in a different conference. But back when I was there, Mizzou was the,
I spent some time in Kansas City, so I remember a little bit. So you were down there, you were with a company called Boulevard, you were doing a couple other things in the brewery business as well, too.
Yeah, I co-opted in the brewery business a little bit, and then actually ended up in aviation, had a chance to go to work for one of the major airlines in the United States, American Airlines, and spent my entire career in basically commercial aviation, either directly working with the airline or doing consulting work back with the airlines. Then, like I say, I went back to my, true passion and got this wild notion to open a brewery, and boom, here we are.
And you get a name like Barnstormer, which transitions, right?
It is.
So what did you do? What did you fly? Did you fly anything cool?
You know what? I've had my hands on darn near probably every airplane in the sky that flies in North America at one time or another. My background in terms of, like, say, true flying, the coolest airplane I've ever flown is definitely an RV-6, which is a all-metal, two-place, fully aerobatic airplane.
Okay.
I actually built it from scratch. So built it from scratch.
You built this?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
All right.
You know, you go to the end of the runway and you're sitting here thinking, okay, when I push the power forward, we get to down here to the other end of the runway, are we flying? And your mind just runs wild with you. But yeah, by far the coolest, in terms of just performance airplane, yet you can, say, throw a family member in it and fly safely from one place to another at 200 some odd miles per hour, and a decent fuel burn as well.
Cool.
You know, I never flew for a living in my entire career. I could have pursued a career in flying, but I honestly, when I went to work for American, I literally did a lot of ride-alongs in the cockpit, and I just couldn't take the monotony of sitting there, waiting, and especially some of the major airports, both, say, like here in Toronto, the New York airports, some of the California airports. I mean, you're just basically sitting, waiting, move forward, one airplane length, wait 2 more minutes, move forward, move forward, finally
not a
take
lot's
off.
happening between takeoff and landing, really, is there?
Yeah, it's, you might think there's a whole bunch of glory in the flying side of it, but believe me.
Well, you try not to get all Top Gun when you're sitting on an airline, right? You're like, okay, throw it in reverse, fly right past me.
Yeah, always been looking for Kelly the whole time. So.
Good luck with that. So, favorite airplane? Got to ask you that.
Oh, favorite airplane. Well, I've been rattling on about the RV-6. RV-6 would definitely be my, favorite general aviation airplane.
Yeah.
Favorite, commercial airplane, probably the 757, even though it's getting,
it's a big one.
Getting outdated a little bit now.
Yeah.
The 757 is just an amazing airplane, has a whole bunch of power. It's technically set up just darn near the same as a 767.
Yeah.
When we were operating those, we flew them into a lot of high altitude, high temperature airports.
Sure.
And they perform wonderfully coming in and out of those.
So it's a good versatile plane.
Yeah, good, versatile, safe airplane.
Kind of describes you a little bit. I like a CF-105. I've just been a junkie for the old Avro since, the first time I ever read about it. You got to be, pretty patriotic about that one. And then, of course, 757's a cool plane.
The newer versions, the 787's a darn nice airplane as well.
Isn't that what Donald Trump just recreated?
I think he's flying the 757.
He's got a massive plane.
Yeah, that's a 757 you see in his background all the time.
Compensating. Maybe. So you come up to Canada, you've got this incredible brewery idea, right? Barnstormer gets born how? How do you create this?
So Barnstormer, you might know, Barnstormer is a reference to actually a stunt pilot from like the 1920s.
They used to go in the tricks, right?
Yep. So right after the World War, the United States in particular, and also Canada, sold off all of their, say, small fighter aircraft to the general public and for cheap, like pennies on the dollar. With no regulations on who can buy them. So even you could go and buy one of these airplanes.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Yes, exactly. And this is about how this came down. So they sold off all these airplanes, and all these stunt pilots that probably didn't have any experience flying. Some of them did. Some of them were wonderful pilots. Started flying with local carnivals and circus. So they would actually just travel along with carnival or circus, set up in an adjacent field, and offer airplane rides and/or just do aerobatics for the, say,
and we're not talking snowbirds. We're talking guys with old planes with real no skill other than what they might have just figured out.
You're talking a biplane and piston-driven, engines, and pilots that probably didn't have, a good long training period.
Well, you can see some of those old black and white videos of the biplanes that actually go in, boom, in one side of a barn and out the other.
Yeah, and that's say like where the name came along from. But more so known for their
scares the cows, but it's good.
Airplane rides at the carnival type thing. So yeah, everything here is aviation branded, as you see. I mean, ranging from our menu items to all the beers. All of our fermenters are named after famous female aviators. Just everything's aviation. So.
Cool. So to develop all that, you didn't just come up here and go, you know what, I really like this one kind of beer. And that works well for Steam Whistle, and there's a few breweries that do well with one beer, and they do well. But you've traveled the world as well, too, to get sort of a palate for different beers.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite beers? Where have you been to experience that?
In the aviation world, I've been lucky enough to have experiences all over the world, and ones that I haven't had to fund out of my own pocket, but through business experience I've been able to do. So that's a good question. Probably one of my absolute favorite beers, say worldwide, is actually on the west coast of the United States, from a brewery called Ballast Point. It's a beer called Sculpin. It really influenced our Flight Delay IPA.
It's called Sculpin?
Sculpin.
Okay.
It's, named after a fish, actually, an indigenous fish.
Okay.
So it's one of the proverbial West Coast IPAs, one of the original West Coast IPAs. So very tropical, fruity, high amounts of bitterness, but you can still drink a lot of it and doesn't leave that nastiness in your mouth. And,
sure.
and that's kind of where Flight Delay came from.
Flight Delay is a great beer too. It's popular, right?
Yeah, it's our say volume-wise our most popular beer. It's in the Lcbo and in the beer store. We're in about 200 Lcbos with the Flight Delay now, and
which is not easy.
No,
I want to get to that in a second, but before I get into that. You say the term IPA.
Yep.
Now, I get it only because you've educated me on this before and I got to ask you, but for a lot of our viewers, they may not know what an IPA necessarily is because they're used to going to the beer store or the liquor store and picking up what's generic, the typical go-tos, because they're not sure about what does IPA mean? What is an IPA or what does that explain that?
The first thing I'll start off with is the Keith's IPA is the biggest falsehood of an IPA out there today.
Okay.
An IPA is supposed to be an India Pale Ale. So literally India referring to India when Great Britain was running India. Mm-hmm. So at that point in time, there were only breweries in the UK. And, well, I should say, what is the UK today?
Yeah.
In, say, England.
Yeah.
So England was brewing all the beer, sticking it on ships, and basically transferring it to colonies. Hence India. Mm-hmm. To get to India was a particularly long boat trip, and the beer would spoil. So they found over time that if they added more and more hops to the beer, the hops add an acidic character to the beer, which stabilizes the beer, and the beer doesn't spoil on the trip.
Sure.
So traditionally, like an IPA was a very, very hoppy beer, but the IPA, say,
would last longer though.
Yeah, lingo. Like I say, came from, at that time, England. So it had traditional English or traditional German hops, so more of the like earthy tones and spicy tones and things like this.
Which would be popular in places like India as well, too.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and goes well with, say, the traditional, spicier foods. So when the IPA came to the United States, it was as well, same English-style IPA. In, say, the late 80s, early 90s, the IPA got twisted a little bit on the west coast of the United States. and started to use newer, what I call New World hops or North American hops.
Okay.
And a lot of the North American hops tend to carry citrus flavors or tropical flavors, completely different than the original IPAs.
Well, a lot of that's with soil and things like that too, right?
Yep,
Based on location, like coffee does, and chocolate, and all kinds of things are different.
The plant varietals that grow, say in England versus, the Northwest United States.
Sure.
So all of a sudden there's this new category of, it's still an IPA and still made, say, traditional to the old IPA methodology, but it's literally made with New World hops. So that's what ours is. That's what I was saying, one of my favorite beers.
That's the one out west in Western United States.
Exactly. So the West Coast IPA style brings more like our flight delay, like the mango, lychee, passion fruit, some citrus on the nose, maybe some piney notes as well in there, and kind of stays away from those herbal or traditional spicy tones.
Sure.
And then...
And citrus is a big thing with people now too, right? They like that new... the new orange or new spice orange to the beer as well too.
Yeah, so that's that describes both my favorite beer and also the beer style of
which
IPA.
Is great because I wanted to get that out there because some people are gonna be like, okay, craft beer, sure, and they don't get it.
The craft beer world. Not all the beers are huge, big, in your face, tasty beers. I mean, we both do a blonde and a lager here. The 400 Blonde Ale, named for the highway, of course, and then we would do a YYZ first class lager.
And it's nice that you have this. There's a theme to it as well too, right? So everything's got sort of a theme to it.
Yep.
So, Barnstormer, what were your first couple of beers that you launched? What were your first?
So I'll skip back. I'll tell you the story. So one night there's a group of us, and one person's still a partner to today. Okay. Sadly enough, some of the other people aren't with us anymore. We were basically sitting around, and I knew I was going to open a brewery. At the time, I didn't know that, say, one person would be a partner, one wouldn't. But anyway, a group of guys, friends, sitting around, drinking some beers, imagine that. And we're brainstorming names. Shocking. So literally, we've got the chalkboard going behind a temporary bar we'd set up at just call it a man cave location. Yeah. And I don't know, this had happened before and before and before, and the next day you come back and you're like, that's not the best name in the world. Off with the eraser. We're sitting there one night, and it was getting late in the evening, and all of a sudden, somebody came up with Barn Burner, actually. And Barn Burner got written on the board. I was like, nah, AGCO.
Barn Burner sounds like it's going to hurt your gut.
Well, and AGCO and the Lcbo are never going to let you have anything burning. I mean, no. You might get by with some cinnamon burning.
Incense burning.
Yeah. You're not having bombs. You're not having any burning. So, anyhow, all of a sudden, Barnstormer popped in my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is aviation. This is the retro aviation feel I'm looking for.
Great fit.
Boom. Let's do this. Yeah. And within probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes of that going up on the board, we had the Flight Delay IPA, which is still with us today. We had the Parachute Porter, which is still with us today. Okay. We had the 400 Blonde Ale, which is still with us today. Yeah. We had Cocky Captain, which is still with us today. Let's see, what else?
I like the Billy Bishop.
Yeah, Billy Bishop. Yeah, the Billy Bishop Brown was with us then. Yeah. So literally out of that initial, say, 20-minute brainstorming session, now, granted, it wasn't the first 20 minutes, but out of that thing, it walked in the next day.
The next 20 was fantastic. Yeah. Once you hit that spark.
Yep. And and then the next day you walk in, you're like, you know what? This will actually work. And
cool. Yeah. And kudos to that, because it's definitely proven to be quite a success.
Yeah, we've done well. Everybody likes airplanes and good beer and good food.
Well, part of that success, though, too, is, well, you're enthusiastic about it. You have obviously got a dynamic team here, which is nice, too, right? Yeah. So more than just having that chalkboard and a couple of titles, you've done some good branding. Now, after that, so now you've got these beers. And now you've had your wonderful struggles of what it's like to try and get into the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, because on a provincial government aspect and on licensing and all that, it's difficult, isn't it? Like, it's not what people think.
Very, very. First, I'd like to circle back. You mentioned a team. At one point in time, we started here, and there's two of us. At this point in time, we employ close to 40 people, and quite a few in the brewery, quite a few on the restaurant side, quite a few on the sales side. We do our own distribution and delivery, so distribution and delivery side as well. Employing 40 people has honestly become just as important as the rest of the business to myself. Yeah. And not only the employment of those people, but just what you said, the team that you have to put around you to actually make something happen. Yeah. And having the good team around you. I can't speak highly enough about my team, ranging from the operations here in the restaurant to the creative side. You name it.
Yeah. Having that loyalty and trust from a team too, right? That trust you and you trust them. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Yeah. So back to the Lcbo and circling back to doing business with the Lcbo and with the beer store. Sure. The Lcbo is in one case, a wonderful entity because they're the largest consumer of beer, wine, and spirits in the world. And if I go down,
Ontario,
yeah,
keep up the good work. Keep up.
You go down here and you sell the Lcbo beer or sell them spirits, and you've sold a lot of it. And the sales effort maybe is just like one person working with them, or maybe two people working with them, and you can sell a tremendous amount. On the other hand, the bad part is they're the only outlet for, well, I'll say 60% of the only outlet for beer in the province, and the only outlets for spirits in the province. So if you don't sell to them, you're pretty much limited to your own retail store, or limited to licensee sales, or limited to things like that. So
people need to realize that they can't just suddenly buy a case of beer or take it to their place and sell it.
No,
there's huge licensing for that.
Is say moving here 18 years ago, one of my biggest questions that I've always asked is, why does the Lcbo need radio commercials? It's not like I'm going anyplace else to buy alcohol. So I mean, who are they competing with? So anyhow, the listing process with the Lcbo, like what were you wanting to know?
So I want to know what it's like to get in there. Like when you, because the applications take time.
Yep.
You finally get in. Tell me a bit about that.
So it's quite a process. They have an electronic system that you start off with. Make your submission. Your submission's kind of as general as, hey, I want to sell you this blonde beer, and this blonde beer's name's this, and here's some general tasting notes, and maybe here's some how we're going to market it, or if we've sold it before, here's some sales information on it, something like that. There's a panel at the Lcbo that screens those initial submissions. After it goes through that initial submission process, then if and that's a big if it's selected, then you go to a tasting process. So then you actually provide a liquid sample for tasting. It goes before another panel. They taste. I'm not sure the tasting process, whether it's blind tasted, triple blind tasted.
So you have to hope you hit the palate.
Yep. And that's
which is funny, because what if you get a team of people who just don't like that particular thing, and that's it?
Yes, and or don't understand the style, or maybe just don't like beer.
And it could just be really unique, and they've never tried it, and that's
and that's a I'd say a concern of all of us that are in the craft beer industry here. Now, recently, the grocery stores have been allowed to sell beer.
I saw that.
Yes, so the grocery store channel works completely different. You still have to go through the entire listing process with the Lcbo, but they literally don't do the first screening process. All you do is you list your item, you do the lab testing, which you normally have to do, you have to do your label examination, and then you're basically listed in the grocery catalog, and the grocery store buyers select the beers that they want on their shelves. So you don't go through that tasting panel or initial selection process within the Lcbo. So the grocery channel is a little bit more open. I expect that you'll see...
And they might buy just based on catchy names too, right? Or
the grocery, and coming back to commercials and shelf space, one of the things I'm seeing, the grocery store leadership and operators are very, very astute and smart people.
Sure.
And they like SKUs that move off the shelf quickly. They like things that sell. And they want to be able to manipulate the shelf and planogram to do that. So remember, everything that comes to their catalog has to come through the Lcbo. So I see a lot of pain on the grocery side of things not getting processed through the Lcbo's process to get in the grocery catalog.
Yeah.
Yet they want it, and they want it on their shelves. So it'll be a...
overall process time, what, 6 months, 3 months?
The Gantt chart that the Lcbo actually uses is a 16-week listing process. But that's a best case 16 weeks. They clearly admit that it doesn't happen on.
And if they give you the thumbs up, you got to be ready to go, because that's a lot of volume too. Because you've got how many stores and how many?
Yeah, like I said, we're in about 200 stores, now, something like this. For beer, we're getting ready to launch spirits here very shortly. But just like you say, the servicing 200 stores. And the funniest part is they don't even have an electronic system to place orders. So if you do self-delivery, you actually call every store and take your orders. And
so you're your own distributor.
Yeah.
So you're going around, instead of having somebody who just says, okay, we've scanned it, we're down to our last 4 cases, can you send it?
Yeah, or a computer.
You have to let them know.
Yeah, or a computer system, right?
It's a lot of babysitting.
It comes down to
a little outdated.
So I guess on the spirit side, the Lcbo's done a great program. It's called the Ontario Craft Distiller Program. It's launching imminently. It was supposed to launch already, but there's been some delays, some personnel changes in the program.
Well, let's come back to that part in 1 second, because Barnstormer is not just beer now.
Yep.
You've got this wonderful new whiskey, not whiskey,
Yep.
right? We call it whiskey, not whiskey, because it's not whiskey. In that, there's a whole way you're allowed to call something whiskey. You've got a new spirits aspect of your business. Tell me a bit about what's going on there, because that's exciting too.
Yeah. So through this Ontario Craft Distiller program, we've launched 4 spirits. They're going to be in the Lcbo. Your standard 4 spirits. So we've launched a gin, a vodka, a distilled grain spirit we call Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, or WTF. You like that, huh?
I like that.
Yeah. And then we have another spirit that's actually distilled from Panella, and a stout that's going to be called the Flying Dutchman. And the Flying Dutchman is not a rum, but it's probably the most traditionally produced non-rum in Ontario, if that makes sense.
I love that rum, not rum, whiskey, not whiskey.
Yeah.
So why? Okay. So let's go to this a little bit, because this is, we don't want people feeling that anything's being deceptive, but there is a certain terminology, and there's a regulation that will allow you to call things certain things. So give me the Coles Notes version of whiskey.
Yeah.
Coles Notes is the Canadian version of your short
Cliff
version.
Notes.
Your Cliff Notes.
That's the Cliff Note version. Coles Notes. Yeah. So for whiskey, laws that were written ages ago. Say that you have to age a whiskey. To be a Canadian whiskey, it has to age in small wood for 3 years, which in straight up English means it needs to go in a barrel and set for 3 years.
And that's a long time to have something sitting and storing.
It's a tremendous barrier to entry for, just darn near any business, but especially, smaller, say, craft distilleries, to go out and actually, say, fund the floor space to store 3 years worth of production in barrels, buy the barrels, pay for labor to create the whiskey, pay for ingredients to create the whiskey, and then to set on it for 3 years before you get any revenue. It's a huge barrier to entry.
Sure.
And in today's world, like when the laws were written, it might have been a good idea. Today, the aging process through exposure to more surface area of wood than what a barrel provided when these laws were written, you can age something much faster today and have the same chemical process, go on. And
now, people talk about accelerants in beer and things like that, because a lot of the big breweries, and certainly not craft breweries, will ever use those sort of accelerants that the bigger guys will use to ferment their beer faster or whatever else. But there is an actual real way to do it naturally in a very easy way. And tell me a bit about that.
Yeah, so we don't use any additives in our
awesome.
Yeah, in anything. In today's world, the big boys run into problems of just scale, that they're trying to ferment something that's like a tower of beer, literally 3 stories, 4 stories tall, and you develop all sorts of problems with this. And then as well, the big boys also need to take beer, packaged beer that might set, say, in a hot truck or a hot container getting shipped somewhere, then not be handled properly, then set in another, bad environment, only to be consumed.
Tough distribution.
Later. So they're forced to pasteurize, forced to filter their beer down to basically tasteless water. I mean, I hate to say it, but tasteless water with chemical stabilizers added to it.
Well, yeah, it's like a brown crayon dipped in warm water sometimes, right? There's a certain aspect of it. Some of those beers are very good, and I certainly wouldn't want to bash the big boys, but there is, unfortunately, a process where things get lost that craft breweries embrace.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, and I mean, at some point in time, everybody's, you're forced to, say, take steps and maybe get closer to, say, what some of the big boys are doing. Right now, there's been a couple small Ontario breweries that have had secondary fermentations. So their cans basically are still fermenting when they go to a shelf space. So when you open them, they're under extreme pressure, or even in some cases, maybe it blows the lid off the can. So they're,
That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dangerous or anything. I mean, just some liquid's going to spray out and you might get covered in beer. The can's not going to catastrophically fail and shoot shrapnel everywhere or anything like that.
We don't need that.
No. But point being is, the Lcbo is on the pathway to, I think, probably starting to enforce some like secondary filtering or pasteurization process, or definitely some quality assurance with some of the small breweries.
Now, there's a coil thing you had mentioned to me privately about ways to make whiskey, not whiskey.
Yeah, so the aging process, we were talking about the aging process, and the aging process is basically just a factor of, in spirits, how much barrel, say, space, meaning surface area, is exposed to the actual liquid inside the barrel. So, I mean, if you thought about this table, and you had,
The only surface area is the top.
Yep, surface area just being the top, and you had it stacked up, say, 6 inches tall with, say, we'll go whiskey. All that's touching that whiskey is, this little surface area here. On the other hand, if you thought of aging spirals, it's basically a coil that reminds you of a slinky from when you're a kid. And you thought about taking that slinky and literally little thin cuts of wood just in a spiral and hung those into the same thing, you can quickly see that you've got, you know, hundreds of times the surface area. Yeah, so the chemical reaction that is the aging process takes, you know, much less time.
So you can condense 3 years. So let's break it down to 1 year. You can take 1 year in roughly how much time?
Yeah, it's a couple weeks, something like that, 2 or 3 weeks.
So let's say it's 3 weeks. You can do 3 years in 9 weeks.
6 weeks, something like that, 9 weeks, yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it does change up a little bit based on whose spirals you're using and, you know, various aspects of the spirit that you're aging. Or we use those for beer as well. And,
okay.
You know, there's a completely, I don't want to say completely different process, but different time factors and different, you know, factors involved between, you know, something that's as alcoholic as, say, spirits. You know, we will age in maybe like the 40 to 60%
sure.
ABV range,
yeah.
and how that interacts with the wood versus, say, maybe a 6 or 8% ABV beer interacts with the wood. So there's some nuances, but yeah, plus or minus, yeah.
Sure. So now getting that, you know, the beer, whiskey, not whiskey, whatever, all out into distribution. Is everything also available here at Barnstormer?
Yep. So here at Barnstormer, we have 3 components. We've got the production brewery, we have the restaurant, we have the retail store.
Yeah.
The retail store is open from 11 to 11, 7 days a week. We don't even have to close for holidays. So we actually close Christmas Eve is the one time that we close here during the year. That's because we're a tourist destination.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. In our retail store, all the beers are available, either packaged in can or bottle. We do some growler sales out of the retail store as well. So a growler's a 1.9 liter jug, reusable.
Yeah,
bring in
those.
Yep, fill them up, take them home. It's, you know, 5-6 cups of beer, something like that, or 3 real pints or something, depending on whose calculations.
Bendy straw, you know.
Yeah, who you're going on. So
who you drinking with?
You know, that works out well. As well, we're launching spirits here in the retail store,
which is exciting.
Shortly.
And so, how many different products are you going to have spirits?
We have 4.
4 for sure.
Yeah, so we've got the vodka, the gin, the Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, and the Flying Dutchman.
And you're going to have other flavors?
Yeah, we are. So the initial listing process, and the reason we focus on those are going to be on the Lcbo store shelves. As soon as we get through that hump of getting the label reviews done and getting everything, say, stabilized with that, we're going to launch off into some flavored vodkas, maybe a barrel-aged gin.
Sure.
And we plan to, not for this year, but for next year, introduce a craft cooler line and some craft sodas.
So what would you say is next then for Barnstormer and for Dustin? You know, because you're a fascinating guy, and there's a really cool history to you in your aviation. And again, I'd love to talk to you again about aviation more with you, but I want to actually know what's next for you in Barnstormer. What's next for you guys as a team?
Well, what's coming next for us, I'm sure you've seen. We just purchased a piece of waterfront up in Midland, Ontario.
I've heard about it. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, yeah. So we're right at the foot of King Street on the waterfront.
Yeah,
right on their park. We've got a piece of property that'll support we'll have about 40,000 square feet of brewing space, and then depending on how the plans go and how we develop it, we could have upwards of another 60,000 square feet of actual residential up above us. So it could be quite an establishment to bring both a production brewery, a restaurant, and then some residential of downtown Midland. So that's eating up my future in terms of what's going there.
Awesome.
We hope to break ground maybe sometime this year.
That's exciting.
Just waiting on some engineering stuff to come back before we can make a decision on what the exact outcome will be.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited for what's happening with you, Dustin, and I'm really glad that you've come to Barrie and chosen Barrie as your place for Barnstormer and expanding into Midland, which is going to be a great community for you as well, too. 2 beautiful places. Again, I love what you're doing, and I appreciate your time, especially on getting to know you and the education of craft brewery, because I think a lot of people they're fascinated by it.
Yeah,
so thank you for your time
I appreciate
today.
you coming out.
I appreciate it.
It's
Thanks,
been fun.
Cheers.
Yeah.